Welcome to Gavua's take on Joy News Multi-TV. We are here in the gallery of the Ghana National Museum. We would like to have a conversation about our heritage and our identity crisis. With me for this conversation is Dr. Susan Wilcox, Fulbright Scholar at the University of Ghana. Also in the chair is Dr. Zagba Na Oyote, Executive Director of the Ghana National Museum. Welcome. Thanks for staying with us. We'd like to begin our conversation by asking the question, what heritage is, or what is heritage? In Ghana, we talk about our rich heritage, and we are so proud about a heritage that we have. But what is this heritage at all? We know that heritage is a construction. Some people think heritage is something which is bequeathed to us by our forebears, things that they've done, aspects of their cultural behavior which are of value and need to be preserved for their subsequent generations. On the other hand, heritage is something which can be constructed in the present. If we see something that we do today and we like it and feel like conserving it for the future generations to serve as a reference point, it becomes our heritage. We have two types of heritage: natural heritage and cultural heritage. Natural heritage, we can talk about the natural environment, water bodies, forests, mountains, and so on, which our forebears have enjoyed, preserved, and left for us. We also have the cultural heritage, which would include material things that we use, we produce and use, material expressions of our lives, including architecture, dressing habits, our foods or dishes that we prepare, and so on and so forth. We are today focusing on the cultural heritage. When we have cultural heritage, we have two types. We have the intangible cultural heritage, which would include things that we cannot touch or feel, things that we cannot measure, like folklore, our tales, our stories, our dance forms, our music. Those are included in our intangible heritage. The tangible ones are the ones that we can touch and feel, as I've already mentioned. The question I would like to ask my colleagues to begin the conversation is, who defines our heritage as Ghanaians? Is it our forebears? Is it our leaders? And by leaders, I'm not referring to only political leaders. Leadership starts from the household, through the community, to the district, the region, all the way to the national level. There's leadership at the workplace. So who defines our heritage? Who would like to start with me? Susan?
Okay. I think you've touched on many of the sources of who defines our heritage. I think in many ways it can be a very top-down definition, in the sense that the powers that be, those with influence, are able to shape what is considered to be important, what should be remembered, what's significant. There is also a bottom-up component to it as well, where individuals are constantly sort of figuring out who they are and then using that as a springboard to think about, well, what is our heritage and what are the items and the practices that we want to hold on to and pass down. I think it's complicated, right? It's complex.
Yes, we know that heritage, when we talk about who is defining heritage, what you have spoken about may refer to heritage at the national level. We have national level heritage, which refers to us all as Ghanaians. Then we may have heritage at the community level. But coming to the community level, for example, who defines heritage?
Well, I think that ideally people should define for themselves what they consider as their heritage. But given as we are speaking now from Ghana and for most of Africa, there is the national heritage, the one constructed at independence, bringing us all together. Then, of course, there's also the colonial heritage. So you can subdivide it into as many headings as possible. What is important is how we define ourselves and what we think is valuable, and that's which we want to keep and to use for our development. So yes, who should define it? Should be the community that values what it considers as its heritage.
Yes, but if I get you right, you are talking about a shared heritage, because it could be something that we have taken over from the colonial era.
Yes.
But it depends on how we appropriate it, how we use it, how we reassign that heritage, which may not necessarily be ours.
Well,
how we give it new meaning and use it to suit our purposes.
Absolutely. So that is why we define for ourselves what is our heritage. So if you are doing something that is traditionally, well, even that word is dubious. If you do something that is people associate with Europeans and you are doing it, it doesn't mean that cannot be part of your heritage. You can reappropriate it, appropriate it, indigenize it, and use it to define yourself in the 21st century, and nobody can tell you cannot do it because it originated from another part of the world. They do it all the time. So long as it is defined in the interest of your progress, and it is used to ensure that you progress, then you can use it as part of your heritage. Because after all, culture should be about development. All these things about how you progress as a human community. So maybe we can...
Yes, I'll agree with you in that light, because no group of people is isolated. We borrow from our neighbors of the world.
Yes.
So we cannot say we have heritage that is completely or absolutely indigenous.
Correct.
We have both foreign and indigenous elements in our heritage.
Correct.
So it depends on how we make it, the extent to which we use it to our own benefit.
Yes.
Susan, did you have anything to
I was going to
add?
say that I think the intangible heritage is the one that becomes sort of more problematic in terms of how we critique what we take to be our own. If you take something like cocoa, which is not indigenous to Ghana, but it's very tied to Ghanaian economy and to how Ghanaians, cocoa breaks, right? No one would ever question whether or not Ghanaians should claim cocoa as being from here. But when you talk about clothing or you talk about hair, when you talk about the intangible pieces that have to do with our person, that's when it becomes more problematized.
Sure.
Yes.
So we'll come to that. You've touched on two things, hair and clothing, and I'd like us to interrogate that further. But since the executive director of the Ghana National Museum is here, I'd like to ask the question, who safeguards our heritage in Ghana?
Well, again, you can only speak in terms of what is ideally. Ideally, all members of the community should safeguard this. But as an institution, the Ghana Museums and Monuments Board is the legal custodian of Ghana's material cultural heritage. That is all that is tangible. We pride ourselves on having that responsibility, and we like our fellow countrywomen and countrymen to share with us this arduous task of safeguarding what we have defined for ourselves as important. So yes, we, the Ghana Museums and Monuments Board, are the legal custodians.
You are the legal custodians of
sir.
our heritage.
Yes.
So that provides the legal framework for safeguarding heritage in Ghana. But what about the works of other agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency? Because they are supposed to ensure that there's environmental and social impact assessment, especially in times like today when there's large-scale constructional activity. What relationship do we have between the Ghana Museums and Monuments Board and the Environmental Protection Agency in order to safeguard our heritage?
Yes, well, yes, you're right. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, does a lot of work in this area, generally in the areas of compliance. But we as a museum ultimately have to oversee the work before it begins. In other words, when, say, for example, a gold mine is going to be sited somewhere, we have to make sure that the operation of that mine or those mines do not destroy the things that the people in the town hold dear. So we always go over and do a cultural impact assessment. But there are other kinds of assessment that the EPA coordinates to make sure that the totality of the community's experience is not endangered by that. We have a good working relationship. All relationships can be improved. Legislation can strengthen how we get on. And the more stakeholders are involved in this process of safeguarding communities, civil society especially, then we'll get somewhere better than we are today. EPA, yes, very important organization or institution for ensuring that the environment
and Susan, is not... With your experience, how do you think the traditional authorities in Ghana today should work hand in hand with the Ghana Museum Ceremonials Board, the legal custodians of our heritage, to safeguard our heritage?
I think they play a really important role in that, one, they are introducing you to the community and helping researchers to understand the dynamics of their context, right? So that people are not going in there and being inappropriate in terms of how they collect data, what data they take out of there, not being disrespectful, and really getting the okay to go ahead and move forward so that community members will actually be receptive, right? So I think they play a significant role, and I think they need to think about, like, what is their role as traditional leaders in terms of maintaining a structure and a system that in many ways they benefit from the most.
Yeah, but one may ask whether or not our traditional authorities really safeguard heritage for the benefit of the entire society, or it's something which benefits their palaces or for their kingdoms alone. To what extent do you think their work can impact on safeguarding heritage for the nation at large, beyond their immediate communities?
Well, I mean, they're part of, a collective culture, right? And so understanding what happens in one community versus another community, I think you come together, you have a cumulative understanding of what makes up Ghana. I think they play a really important role in terms of thinking about their legacy that's beyond them as an individual, but who they are as part of a community. They're one part of a community, and perhaps a significant one, but not more so than other people, that there's this interaction there. And if their kingdom is important, then it's important that they also, pass down the work that they're doing.
Reconciling the interest of the kingdom with that of the nation. How do you see it?
Well, I think that before we get there, that's a big question. I don't know whether all of them are kingdoms, for example. You see, one could argue that chieftaincy is a political aspect, or typifies a political aspect of our culture, insofar as it has to do with governance. But at the same time, it is often expressed in great cultural ways, which are of importance. So when you hear somebody, definitely when I hear somebody make the statement that chiefs are the custodians of our culture, they are tasking them with a role that is perhaps far too big for them to perform. Now, if I was just to focus narrowly on my professional interests as a museum person, then you say that a lot of the artifacts that are associated with chieftaincy, the regalia, often are examples of the best craftsmanship in certain communities. And chiefs, by their preeminence in those communities, collect or are given those things. So they could be very important partners in setting up community museums because they have the best products of the community. The best music, or the best musicians play for them, the best dancers dance for them, they have the best instruments. So they could be partners for the setting up of the community museum. So we could have what Professor Gavua calls memory spaces that put together spaces for remembering and fueling development in communities. Now, as for the other question about how the nation and the kingdom are reconciled, in Africa, and I know Africa better than anywhere else in the world, or like Africa, like elsewhere in the world, there is the community, the ethnic group, the more bigger regional entity, and the nation. So you can have a situation where, by a series of cooperative maneuvers, all of the narrative contained from the local community through the region, through the nation, can be housed in one space or can be reconciled. There need not be conflict between the nation and the kingdom, since in theory they both focus on developing the human beings that constitute constitute those entities of kingdom, nation, etc.
And certainly, chiefs cannot be the sole custodians of the heritage of any society or group of people. They could be custodians of aspects of that heritage, because the society entails more than just the leadership. And Susan, you as somebody who teaches and works with youth groups, how do you think the youth can be involved in safeguarding the heritage of our society?
I mean, obviously it's important for them to learn about their past and to learn aspects of their culture. Many of the intangible aspects such as music and dance and craftsmen or craftswomanship, those are all skills and trades that I think should be passed on to young people. But I think it should be done in such a way that young people are also shaping it, right? Refiguring it, having it make sense for who they are as young people. So heritage sometimes can seem like a very static thing, but in fact it's ever evolving, and I think giving young people that space makes sense to them. If they want to add some sort of modern flavors to so-called traditional dances, I think that that enlivens it, right? It helps to engage them, and it's a way for them to create a bridge between the past and the present. And I think young people can play a very significant role in moving heritage and culture forward. They do. I mean, inevitably, the young people are the ones that are moving culture forward in many ways.
And in the particular context of Ghana, for some time now, international agencies, including UNESCO, the Midwestern University Consortium, and so on, have been assisting with the conservation and safeguarding of our heritage. Now, it appears to me that many a time they would be interested in conserving heritage that specifies the European intervention in Africa. What about us? Do we have something? How involved are we as a country, apart from just having a legal framework, which we don't support publicly with enough resources to protect? What do you think about foreign intervention in safeguarding our heritage?
Did you want to answer that one?
Well, I think I'm going to continue to build on my initial point. That is, we have to define for ourselves who we are, what we are, and what we want to be. If we are very clear about these things, then these questions of people defining for us or gathering material that they think best typifies us will be minimized. We have to be very vigilant. We have to know what we want as a community, as a people. Now, in a situation where we have signed many agreements with many institutions to help us do many things, we sometimes make ourselves vulnerable. And yes, it goes beyond economics to culture, and culture is a very important area. You would have a cooperation with, you mentioned Michigan and others. All such relations are led by a narrative or shaped by a narrative, and the intellectuals who may be leading those missions may have, you are right, a narrow definition of what Ghana or Africa is. So they will come to say that, in this community in Ghana, they all dance facing eastwards. But that's because somebody saw them dancing one afternoon facing eastwards. So that becomes typical from their narrow narrative. It is important that when a proposal comes in to do work on certain communities and certain aspects of our history and culture, academicians, people who lead in the shaping of thought, should interrogate these things and debate them freely. And sometimes I find in my experience the international academics who come benefit and are grateful. But when we do not engage with them, then they will come with a narrow narrative and carry a jaundiced view of us and send it to their children to consume. So it's vigilance. I think it's vigilance.
And certainly, the intellectuals have been responsible for spreading jaundiced views about who the African is for quite some time. And it is about time we started telling our own story. Fine, the intellectual community, the academicians or academics in general have a lot of work to do in what we teach. How do we teach about ourselves? How do we teach our students to know who we are as a people, learn more about our own environment, rather than certain environments from New York, Rome, Paris, and at the end of it, our youth want to be away, they demean their own values as a people. Fair enough. But it appears that our colleagues in the media to have a stake in this, since they are also a very important medium of education. They hold the power to communicate with a large body of people. So what kind of information can the media, for example, pass on as a process, part of the process of re-educating us about our heritage and safeguarding our heritage?
I think that programs like this are good, and programs that bring up the issues that matter in the shaping of identity and the determination of priorities for development are very important. Yes, the media has a very important role to play, and if we focus for a moment on the whole essence of all of this, the essence of all of this is human development. So, are you going to privilege something called culture or the culture of a people to the development of the human beings, supposing that so-called culture demeans the citizens there? Should we practice? I could give many examples, and at the appropriate time I will. They will tell you they do this thing because it's our culture. But it's demeaning of the community. So if the bigger narrative is human development with local flavors, then you can get the story right, I think. So
certainly, I agree with you. But let me quickly shift by asking Susan the question. Why should we conserve or why should we safeguard our heritage? What is the value of heritage? Who does it benefit?
I mean, obviously, it benefits us as individuals, as a community, as a nation, a region. It's really how we understand who we are, define ourselves, and then with those self-definitions, figure out how we're going to project ourselves into the future. Like, what are our values as a community, as a family, as a region, a nation for development? And some of that obviously is really rooted in what we understand about our past, right? It's a cliche, Sankofa, but I think it's very much true. And just sort of back to what you were talking about a little bit, I think it's about decolonizing, right? So if outsiders are coming in to do this work, it's really important for them to be helped to think about the lens by which they're coming up with their understanding. And if they're really just recreating historical relationships, then that's a problem. Who is owning the data? Who's owning the research? Who's owning the materials that are uncovered? What happens to the information and who gets credit for it? And I think a lot of that is around the issue of decolonization, right? Of decolonizing research, to think about, again, who owns this and for what end.
Yes, and I also understand that heritage is a major source of social and economic development. First of all, heritage helps us to construct an identity for ourselves as a people in the international community of states. Right. Heritage will serve as a reference for us to advance technology. If we cannot build upon what we have, all we'll be doing is to be borrowing and copying from our neighbors of the world. So in that light, heritage is very important. One thing that you both have touched on is how heritage helps in shaping our identity. We have been making efforts to conserve our heritage. Historians have written about our heritage. Heritage practitioners have done so much in this country to portray our so-called rich heritage. But it still appears that we have identity crisis in our country. Now, identity, if we want to talk about identity, it's how someone or a group of people would like to be seen, or how people see a group of people as apart from others. Okay? That is what we mean by identity. Who do I think I am? Who do you think you are? Who do I think you are? That is a major element in identity construction. Okay? A set of attributes that defines people. Some people may use identity to disguise themselves. Okay? In a situation, they may assume an identity in order to take advantage of that situation. And immediately they finish, they change their identity. Identity is not fixed. It can be fluid, or it is fluid. It changes from context to context.
Yes.
Historical context, economic context, social context, ideological context, and so on and so forth. But I will ask, who again helps to define identity in the Ghanaian context? Who gives us our identity? If they say you are African, you are Ghanaian, where from that?
I think it's how it was framed. You know, we talked about a little bit earlier, but what is ideal versus what is the reality, right? So part of, ideally, we do that for ourselves, as has already been said. But so much of it happens from outside. Some of it happens from colonialism, from the media that is not being critical of what it is that they're seeing, observing. It happens from traditional leadership in communities, defining this is what we do, this is who we are. So I think a lot of it comes from outside of individuals. But ideally it should come from within. Absolutely.
But in our case, it appears to me that our history as a people has made it to the point that psychologically, emotionally, and in the past sometimes we were coerced physically to change our identity. And now we have internalized certain aspects of identity that make us feel inferior. And so we would like to see ourselves in the image of others. And I can cite examples. Many of us, when we're growing up in school, and I believe it's still happening today, rather than adopting your own name or accepting your own name with pride, you like to take another name, Apanawewe, okay, Jordan, I'm this, I'm that. Even our soccer players today in the country, our soccer teams, they prefer to be called Chelsea, okay? They prefer to use European names. But it's all over the place. But one thing which clearly bothers me, or has been bothering me, okay, it's the hair pieces that our women have been using and have adopted. Now let me explain that further, and then maybe you can help me to understand it. I am aware of the fact that culture is dynamic, heritage is not static. We need to change, we need to be fashionable. But where heritage is created, an identity is created for you, and you accept it, and it doesn't benefit you economically, and it enriches other societies, then I become bothered. For example, we have our beautiful natural hair as a people. That is what you identify as Africans. Then we've been told, consciously or unconsciously, that when you wear a hairpiece, hair attachment, then you look more beautiful, okay, as an African lady. And so from the 60s, our mothers started using wigs instead of the afro hair. From wigs, they started putting chemicals in their hair called jelly curls. Then recently, we started having the hair attachments, okay? The European naturally will have long hair to protect against the elements, especially the cold weather. We in the tropics have shorter curly hair. Some people may describe it as kinky hair. It depends on what they want to call us. However, it makes us beautiful. But we don't accept that because we want an identity. We want to see our beauty in the image of a European lady. So we go and wear these hair pieces. Now we call it Brazilian hair, Indian hair, and so on and so forth. And we also walk and then do our hands like this, like that, and we think that is the mark of beauty. Isn't that rather inferiority complex? Now, beyond that, it creates a ready market for a product which is made outside our nation. Think about the number of ladies that wear these imported pieces, which makes them uncomfortable. After 1 week or two, you start itching, and some of them have to be tapping their hair, bam, bam, bam. Some have pins and scratching the hair, and you have to go and change it. The chemicals you use in the salon to clean it up. And I think that is benefiting not our society, our economy, but an external economy. Meanwhile, it's also demeaning us. We are not natural again, but our beauty is artificial. What do you think?
I mean, I know from speaking with you over many years that this is something that you care a great deal about, and I understand, I resonate with it too, but I just caution against only looking at through an ethnicity lens or in terms of culture, right? Because that's very much a gender issue as well, that women are expected to be perceived and look in a certain way, and that's something that is not just coming from outside, that's from within the country as well. So I think Ghanaian men, African men need to think about what they value as beautiful too, because yes, individually a Ghanaian woman may not benefit economically from the Brazilian hair market, but she might benefit from the relationship she has with a man. And so we can't look at that hair issue outside of the gender dynamic and the patriarchy that is a part of life in the world, but certainly in Ghana. But I hear what you're saying, and I think that you could say the same thing for young men who walk around with baggy pants on and not understanding the context of where the baggy pants style came from. And again, sending or using Western products to adorn themselves. And that money is not coming to Ghana as well. Ghana is not making jeans.
And we can say the same about men and women in Ghana who would like to lighten their skin
right, there's
color.
any number of ways in which we internalize inferiority. And I think that how do people understand that they're doing that is the question, right? How do we help people to see that what you're practicing is not just a naive kind of choice, but it's really rooted in a heritage that maybe you're not really familiar with?
Susan, I totally agree with you. I will not discuss hair pieces from a parochial point of view. It depends on how you, the individual, would like to be seen, your own identity. Okay. However, personally, I would prefer an African woman with a natural hair, with natural skin. That is my preference. I don't know what Zagba would like in an African woman in particular. I don't want to make it sexist, but would you want an African woman with the long hair piece and what? Just tell me.
I wanted to return to something Susan said earlier before it got down to my own personal taste. Susan said, and it's very important, all these women with long hair that you've identified, that we've discussed, they all have husbands or boyfriends, meaning that the men are quite satisfied with that. What this means is that the men are complicit in this thing we are describing.
Certainly.
And that the problem should not be addressed as the problem of the African woman, but of an African. And the partners you need to enlist to address this issue must cut across both.
That is a very good point you are making. And I would like you to elaborate more on it when we come back. Welcome back to Gavua Take. I'm Kojo Gavua, Associate Professor of Archaeology and Heritage Studies at the University of Ghana. I have with me Dr. Zagba Na Oyote, Executive Director of the Ghana Museums and Monuments Board, who is in charge of the National Museum here. I also have Dr. Susan Wilcox, Fulbright Scholar at the Department of Archaeology and Heritage Studies, University of Ghana. Zagba, you are Executive Director of Ghana Museums and Monuments Board, in charge of the Ghana National Museum.
And other.
We had a nice conversation and you were making a point. I would like you to continue with that, but let me just quickly put in this question. Kwame Nkrumah, Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, built this museum at the dawn of Ghana's independence. He would like to use this museum as the basis for giving Ghana, the new nation Ghana, an identity. The museum would be part of our heritage. You assumed office here not long ago. How do you assess the museum, and what do you anticipate for this museum in the long run?
Well, thanks for that, Kojo. The Ghana Museums and Monuments Board has many challenges. Indeed, it was opened the day before independence. And as I always say, we are very proud of the fact that we predate Ghana by one day. It was opened on the 5th of March. We were supposed to be that institution that would display and demonstrate our heritage, even as we evolved and made one. We were supposed to collect, preserve, and showcase all that define us as a nation, not in the narrow Ghanaian context, but in an enlarged African context. Indeed, the lower gallery here, as I was told them from the notes, will reflect what constitutes Ghana, and the upper gallery would constitute a display case of a wider Africa. So the Egyptian pieces, Nubian pieces, others from Congolese, some of them are in storage now, but Ghana's whole premise of a nation within Africa was reflected in the museum. We have many challenges, 50 odd years and more down the line. In fact, the structure itself has not been changed much. It has many defects. We have not fulfilled the promise of building museums in every region. We have a huge portfolio of forts and castles, which constitutes the monuments division of the work, some of them in serious need of repair. 500-year-old buildings are not easy to look after, especially in saline environments as they are. All of them are by the coast. So yes, we have many challenges. In the past year that I've been here, we've tried to make new friends, new allies, reprofile the museum, increase our capacity building exercises, and just continue doing the work that we can do. In many ways, we are like many public institutions in Africa. They never really get all the money that they need. But there's an openness on our part to engage with all sectors of the society, not just philanthropists, but also investors who can discuss with us possible ways of partnership to redefine and to represent ourselves.
Yes, Susan, as a sister who has lived in the diaspora for a long while and coming back to Ghana, how do you see our National Museum? And what do you suggest to be the way forward for our museum sector?
I think he touched on many of the challenges, right, of a public institution that is apparent in Ghana as it is in New York, right? So there's never enough funds to really showcase the work, to do it properly, to deal with climate control, all those different aspects of it. I think one of the challenges, though, of museums everywhere is how do you create them so that they feel like they're living? Where young people want to come in, where people who are not educated, let's say formally educated, will feel that this is a place where they too can come. And it's not just something for academics or for tourists. And I think that's a challenge. So is it embedded in school curriculum that students come here not for just a trip, but for part of what they're learning and part of the ways in which they will be assessed? How do you get someone who normally would not come to a museum to come in? And I think that kind of really enlivens the space. And I know that there's been some approaches to that in New York that have really worked to make it a community space where sometimes it's open, it's free, there's music and there's dance and there's other activities going on. And oh, by the way, there's these incredible exhibits as well. So I think vitalizing it for just the average person is a really important thing to do.
Yes,
really important.
Yes, we are doing all these things now, but we can do more of that. Sure. It is about the relevance of the programs we create and how ambitious our outreach program is. And as much as we are a network of a number of schools in Accra, and some come from outside, it is important that we push forward the idea of regional museums, because not every school child in Ghana can come to the National Museum in Accra. We have enough pieces to create museums in different parts of Ghana. But you understand how challenging that is, the amount of resources required to create a space this size or even half this size. So we're working on it. We're working on it. It's a daily endeavor.
Yes, and I believe that it is not for the Ghana Museums and Monuments Board alone to ensure that our museums are well placed. We have so many stakeholders. The museums belong to us. They give us an identity as Ghanaians. So artists should be involved. Traditional authorities should be involved. The public should support in terms of resources. I understand that. So the museum gives us identity. So let's quickly finish with our discussion on heritage and identity, and then we can see the way forward. We were talking about some of the positive elements of identity creation. But while we said we have identity crisis in Ghana, it's that we seem to have taken some of the ways in which the world had looked at us in the past, and we have internalized those, and it's affecting us, or it's negatively affecting us today. For example, we were described as a people who are so diverse, and we keep on fighting each other. We are tribes, intertribal wars, and so on and so forth. And we haven't seemed to overcome those up to now. So we fail to have confidence in each other as a people. We cannot trust to work together collectively. And in recent times, we see the construction of identity dividing and subdividing us through church. Because I belong to one church group, you don't belong to my church group, I see you differently. Through partisan politics, because you belong to another political party different from mine, you are not my brother, you are not my sister. Because you belong to a different language group, you are not my brother. We use even educational institutions. You went to Presec, I went to Nkonya, so we do not belong. Someone went to Achimota, the other went to Prempe, so they do not belong. So we are continually subdividing, segregating ourselves, instead of rather uniting in this diversity and bringing all these backgrounds together as a strong force to work. Now, we also use this identity to economically subjugate ourselves, playing down on our economy, as I mentioned already, with reference to hair, sometimes in clothing, and so on and so forth. And other items, we fail to admire, appreciate what we have as a people. We do not invest in things that Ghanaians make. We don't see value in them, but rather we see value in things that our neighbors of the world have, and everybody is clamoring over what comes from outside. We would like to buy Rice Masters rice rather than buying rice from Akuse or from elsewhere in the regions. Why is that? Those are some of the negative elements which come with identity creation, that we feel so inferior that we want to see ourselves in the image of others. In order to be good Ghanaian means you must pretend to be speaking like European. So we call what some have defined as LAFA, locally acquired foreign accent. Okay, you have lived outside for a long time, but you still speak like someone I met in the late 80s or early 80s in school. Okay, Kofi Annan has been out there for a long time, but he still speaks with a heavy African accent. So why do we have to construct an identity that people across the world don't even understand?
Kojo, you've packed a lot into what you said, and it will take a while to unravel that. But I think we should also address the economic basis of our so-called inferiority. I believe that the association of blackness, Africanness, whatever, with weakness, with societies that cannot produce enough for their citizens to consume, the whole looking outward for sustenance, the whole looking outward for aid, donors, the whole looking outward for models of excellence in governance, in the fashion, in style, in spiritualism, in everything. It's all linked in a way which makes us really, really vulnerable. And you've identified all the things. Well, one way through which we can begin to get out of this mess, it's be a productive society economically, and that will give us more confidence. I think that now a lot of the food that we eat is brought from Europe and is heavily subsidized. Therefore, it's cheaper for European farmers to sell surplus rice here than it is for the farmer in the north to grow the rice. And there's all manner of things. So let us try to tackle them one at a time, but begin with the important issue of having some confidence in ourselves of who we are and what we want to be. Ultimately, this whole cultural enterprise should be about our aspiration. What do we want to be in the years to come? Do we want to be a society that imports all that it needs from abroad, or a society that wants to produce and export so others can see what is beautiful about us? This will be one way of contributing to this. And when we gather like this and discuss, sometimes we should also bring in our contemporaries. As for Susan, she's one of us, so it is not the point. Others from Spain, Netherlands, to sit with us to address the issue of this weakness of Africa as an international problem, not a local Ghanaian one, because we've been part of the world since the 14th, 13th centuries. So the modern world does not exist without any notion of us. So let us together discuss this shared heritage, this shared problem, so that we can find a shared solution and create a shared happiness for all of humanity.
I'm glad you've mentioned shared heritage. So we must not accept this culture of poverty, which seems to define Africa, that once you are African, you must be poor. When you come out, you must... and then sometimes we make mockery of ourselves and say, this is culture, this is traditional. So when you go to the kitchen of poverty with firewood, okay, wood fuel, smoke-filled kitchen, then we say, oh, that is African culture. When we see someone carrying firewood on the head, we say that is African culture. And we express this in the form of art and everything, just internalizing this culture of poverty, which, if I understand you correctly, we must begin to eschew. Susan, what do you have to say to the same issue before we look at the way forward and conclude?
I think it's absolutely right. There's a conflation of income and ethnicity, right? Connecting those two things together. But it's also, we live in a time of incredible capitalism and globalization, right? So it's not just in Africa, but it's all around the world that we live in a time of aspiration. Like, people are aspiring to be something in an economic sense that they are not. And so some of it is cultural, you know, in terms of crafts and arts and, you know, the things that we typically think of as cultural. But I think a lot of it is also around aspiring to this capitalistic ideal of what it means to be a modern person. And so what people often aspire to are those things, right? Why is Accra Mall so popular, right? ANC Mall, Marina Mall. You may not shop there, but you go there, see and be seen, right? The cars you drive, the bags you wear. We like labels more than we actually care about the design of the bag. And that's a worldwide phenomena. And Africa is now able to partake of that for better or for worse. And so the question is, like, some of the questions that you asked of how we understand ourselves, who's asking those questions, and how are they being answered? And as an educator, I would say it's really important to have that happen in the classroom, because where else will it happen? Or it happens in a museum. It happens in some sort of educational institution where we can push people to think about, well, why do you want that? Why is this rice better than the other rice? If this rice was packaged better, you know, if Ghanaian rice was packaged differently, would you eat it? And I think presentation sort of matters now in a way that it probably didn't before.
Yes, so how do we maintain ourselves in this global and globalized context?
Yeah.
How can we remain Ghanaian in the midst of all this bombardment from the external system? Okay, so I'll ask the question, who do you think you are? Who do you really think you are out there? Who do I think I am? Who are we as Ghanaians? Do we have to be who we are not? I think it borders on changing the mindset that anything that is akin to Western European value system, it's modernity. If we want to modernize, then we must behave like Europeans. But we can modernize within our own context. We can remain African, but still transform our ways of life, transform what we have as a people, and accept our own identity. On that note, I'd like to ask, what is the way forward? We have started discussing it. What aspects of our heritage and identity can we develop in order to remain who we are?
Susan?
Which aspects of, it's a good question. I mean,
If I lead you on, I can immediately say that some of the intangible aspects of our heritage, the arts, the arts are aspects of our heritage that cannot be taken away from us. What do you say? The social system, technology, what do we have that we can build upon and remain as Ghanaians, Africans within the international context?
you can build upon anything, right? Because the world is constantly changing, and you can still do something in a quote-unquote Ghanaian or African way. I think it's not so much what you do, but how do you get people to do it, right? So where's the will to be inventive in a way that still holds on to who you are? And to me, that's the challenge of, because Ghana is a very entrepreneurial place. I mean, everybody here has multiple jobs, is doing different things, is always figuring out a way to either make money or to make what they have last. I think there's a lot of creativity that happens on a daily basis, but to springboard that into something that's more of a national movement, that's the challenge, right?
Zagba, is there customary behavior that you'd like to see advanced?
Ambition, aspiration, a new culture that is focused on making Ghana and Africa great, that does not accept a compromised worldview, or one that sees itself as weak and diminished. An African that wants to be the best she or he can be. And if you come from that point of view, then technology has no color, ideas have no color. What will it take to make our society vibrant, so that from where we stand in the world, we can create local flavors to be as good as anybody else?
Yes, we can be as good as anybody else. We can play soccer or football as good as any other nation, no matter the challenges of that. In the same way, we can transform our economy. Once we believe in ourselves, we can transform our society. One thing that we have that they can take away from us, it's our social warmth, the way we network as a people. That cannot be taken away from us, and we can develop upon that and have trust in each other, trust in ourselves, trust in our identity, believe, as you intimated, that we can make it within our own nation as a people. On that note, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Zagba.
Thank you.
Susan. And I'd like to thank all our viewers for your patience. Let's keep on asking the question, who are we as a people? What do we have? How can we be ourselves within the international community of states? Let's be proud as Ghanaians. Let's not feel inferior. We are also the children of God, made in God's image, and we can make it work in our own society. Thank you.